March 3, 2024. Miguel Santos had been running charters for tourists for 12 years. Clean business, quiet life. That's exactly why the bleeding hitman chose his dock. 2 in the morning, Puerto Vallarta. Miguel heard the splash before he saw the man crawling from the water, bullet holes in his chest. Cartel tattoos on his arms, blood mixing with seawater on Miguel's deck. The man whispered 5 words that changed everything. El Lobo knows you're here. El Lobo. The wolf. Miguel's former DEA partner who disappeared into the shadows 15 years ago. The man who knew Miguel's deepest secret. What happened in the next 10 minutes would trigger the largest cartel manhunt in Mexican history. The FBI would reopen cases they'd buried, and Miguel Santos would remember why some ghosts never stay dead. The night his past came bleeding onto his dock. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Miguel's hands moved on instinct, muscle memory from another life. He dragged the bleeding man under the canopy where the deck lights couldn't reach, checking the marina for movement. Empty. The tourist boats bobbed silently in their slips, their owners safely tucked into resort beds miles away. The hitman's breath came in wet gasps. Young, maybe 25, with the lean build of a runner. Smart enough to swim instead of taking the roads. The Sinaloa cartel's eagle tattoo spread across his shoulder, but Miguel noticed something else, a small scar behind his left ear. The kind surgeons left when they removed tracking chips. This man had been prepared to disappear. How many others? Miguel whispered. 14. Blood bubbled from the corner of the man's mouth. All dead. Ambush at the compound. Someone knew we were coming. Miguel's charter business occupied the quietest corner of Marina Vallarta, deliberately chosen for its distance from the main harbor traffic. No security cameras, no night watchmen making rounds. He'd picked this spot precisely because it was forgettable, the kind of place where a man could rebuild his life without questions. Now that anonymity felt like a trap. What's your name? Carlos Mendez. The man's eyes focused with effort. I know who you are, Santos. We all did. The American who fed information to the Juarez cartel. The one who got El Chapo's boy killed. Miguel's blood turned to ice. The village of San Miguel de Allende, 15 years ago. 37 people dead, including a 12-year-old boy who'd been in the wrong place when the shooting started. Miguel had fed the intelligence believing he was targeting a weapons cache, not a family gathering. Some mistakes echo forever. Carlos struggled to sit up, pressing something into Miguel's palm. A cell phone, its screen cracked but still glowing. El Lobo. He sent this. Said to give it to you when the time came. Miguel stared at the device. He hadn't heard from Thomas El Lobo Castellanos since the DEA operation that went sideways. His partner had vanished the same night Miguel submitted his resignation. Now, 15 years later, Thomas was orchestrating hits on El Chapo. The phone buzzed. A text message appeared. The boy's father never forgot. Neither did I. Miguel's throat tightened. El Chapo's youngest son, Eduardo. The child who died because Miguel trusted intelligence from a compromised source. Because he'd been too eager to make the arrest that would define his career. Carlos, who hired your crew? Anonymous contract. 5 million split 15 ways. Hit El Chapo at his Culiacan compound. Carlos coughed, specks of blood hitting Miguel's shirt. But when we got there, it was like they knew. Motion sensors, automated weapons, enough firepower to level a city block. Someone wanted us dead more than they wanted El Chapo dead. The implications crystallized. Thomas had orchestrated a suicide mission, using these men as messengers. The real target wasn't El Chapo. It was Miguel's peace of mind, his carefully constructed anonymity, his belief that the past stayed buried. A boat engine echoed across the water, growing louder. Miguel killed the deck lights and moved to the railing. A cigarette boat, running without navigation lights, cutting through the harbor toward his marina. Professional operation, military precision. Either federal agents or cartel cleanup crew. Both options terrified him equally. They're coming, Carlos whispered. El Lobo said they would. Said you'd have to choose. Choose what? Run or fight? Hide or remember who you used to be. Miguel looked at his boat, the Segunda Oportunidad, second chance in English, 36 feet of honest work and quiet mornings. 12 years of taking tourists to see dolphins and serving them cold beer while they pretended to fish. 12 years of being nobody special. The cigarette boat was 200 yards out now, its engine throttling down as it approached the marina. Miguel could make out 3 figures aboard, but the darkness hid their faces. Carlos gripped Miguel's wrist with surprising strength. The message isn't finished. El Lobo. He said to tell you the boy's father is coming, not El Chapo, the real father. Miguel's world tilted. Eduardo hadn't been El Chapo's biological son, that was cover. The boy's real father was someone else entirely, someone who'd spent 15 years planning revenge while the world assumed he was mourning a stepson. The phone buzzed again. This time, a photo loaded slowly on the cracked screen. A man in an expensive suit standing outside Miguel's favorite cantina in town. The timestamp read 3 hours ago. Below the image, another message. He's been watching you for months. Tonight, he moves. The marina is surrounded. You have 10 minutes before they close the net. Choose wisely, old friend. The cigarette boat's engine cut to idle. Voices carried across the water, speaking rapid Spanish, professional, coordinated, closing in. Miguel looked down at Carlos, whose breathing had become shallow. At his boat, representing everything he'd built from the ashes of his former life. At the phone containing a warning from a ghost who apparently still considered him worth saving. 10 minutes to decide whether Miguel Santos, the charter captain, would die tonight, or whether he'd remember how to be the man who'd once hunted monsters in the dark. Miguel's hands trembled as memories flooded back, not of the violence, but of the quiet moments that had built his new life. Sophia making coffee in the galley at dawn, her laugh echoing off the water when tourists struggled with their fishing lines, the weight of her head on his shoulder during sunset charters, her fingers intertwined with his while they watched another perfect Puerto Vallarta evening paint the sky in impossible colors. She didn't know. In 3 years together, Sofia Morales believed she was loving a simple fisherman who'd moved to Mexico for the weather and cheap beer, a man whose worst sin was occasionally burning the fish tacos. She had no idea that Miguel Santos was a carefully constructed fiction, that his real name was buried in classified DEA files, along with commendations and kill counts. Carlos's breathing grew shallower. Miguel knelt beside him, checking the wounds, through and through in the shoulder, superficial cuts from swimming through debris. The man would live if he reached a hospital. But the cigarette boat was 50 yards out now, and Miguel could see the unmistakable outline of assault rifles. Your family? Miguel whispered. Sister in Guadalajara. Never told her about the work. Carlos managed a weak smile. Thinks I sell insurance. Miguel understood. The lies we tell to protect the people we love become prisons of their own. He thought of Sophia's apartment above her family's restaurant, how she always left the light on when he stayed overnight on the boat, how she'd started leaving a spare set of clothes in his cabin, making plans for Christmas in Mazatlan with her parents. She wanted him to meet her father, a proud man who'd built his restaurant from nothing, who'd raised 5 daughters after his wife died. Miguel had been putting off that meeting for months, knowing that one look from a father protecting his youngest daughter might reveal everything he'd worked to hide. The marina held other ghosts, too. Javier, who ran the fuel dock and always had stories about his grandchildren. Maria, who cleaned the boats and hummed while she worked, saving every peso to bring her son back from California. Old Fernando, who sold bait and knew every fish in the Pacific, who'd become the father figure Miguel never expected to need. These weren't just neighbors, they were the family he'd accidentally built while learning to be human again. The phone buzzed with another message. They have Sofia. Cantina Rosa, back room, insurance policy, move fast. Miguel's vision blurred. Sofia was supposed to be home, helping her sister plan a quinceañera, safe in her small world of family celebrations and weekend trips to the market. But Thomas knew Miguel well enough to understand exactly where to apply pressure. El Lobo always did think 10 moves ahead, Miguel muttered. Carlos forced his eyes open. What? My old partner, Thomas Castellanos. We worked narcotics together for 8 years before San Miguel. Miguel checked his watch, 7 minutes left according to the text. I thought he died in Honduras. Apparently, he just got better at disappearing. The cigarette boat cut its engine completely. Miguel heard the soft splash of someone entering the water. Professional swimmers approaching underwater. He had maybe 90 seconds before they surfaced at his dock. In the distance, marina security lights illuminated the main harbor. Normal life continuing. Late-night partiers heading back to their yachts, a few dedicated fishermen preparing for dawn runs. None of them knew that 15 years of buried history was about to explode across their peaceful corner of paradise. Miguel opened the storage compartment beneath his captain's chair. The Glock was exactly where he'd left it 3 years ago, wrapped in oiled cloth with 2 spare magazines. Muscle memory took over, checking the chamber, testing the action, confirming the weight distribution. The gun felt foreign and familiar simultaneously, like speaking a language he'd sworn to forget. Carlos watched him with knowing eyes. There he is. Shut up. The hunter. El Lobo said you were the best tracker he ever worked with. Said you could read a crime scene like a book, think like the monsters you hunted. Carlos coughed, blood flecking his lips. Said that's what broke you in the end. Miguel's jaw tightened. Thomas had been right about that. Miguel hadn't just caught criminals, he'd understood them, gotten inside their heads, anticipated their moves, learned to think with their twisted logic. It made him exceptional at his job and terrible at sleeping. Until Sophia. Until morning coffee and sunset fishing and the revolutionary concept that some people existed purely for joy, without hidden agendas or buried secrets. She'd taught him that healing was possible, that the past didn't have to define every present moment. Now she was paying the price for his attempt at redemption. The marina water barely rippled as someone surfaced 20 feet away, breathing apparatus glinting in the reflected harbor lights. Professional military gear, night vision probably. These weren't cartel soldiers, they were specialists. Miguel tucked the phone into his pocket and helped Carlos to the storage bench. Stay quiet. Try not to bleed on my upholstery. Where are you going? Miguel smiled grimly, feeling 15 years of careful peace dissolving like morning fog, to remember how to hunt monsters. Miguel moved across his deck with the predatory silence that had once made him legendary among DEA field operatives. The muscle memory flooded back, weight distribution on the balls of his feet, breathing controlled and shallow, every sense hyper-focused on the threat emerging from the dark water. The diver surfaced silently at the stern ladder, night vision goggles reflecting the harbor lights like insect eyes. Miguel waited until the man's hands gripped the ladder rungs before striking. The Glock's butt connected with the base of the skull, and the body slipped back into the water without a sound. One down, at least 2 more on the cigarette boat. Miguel's phone vibrated against his ribs. Not Thomas this time, Sophia's number. His blood turned to ice as an unfamiliar voice spoke in accented English. Miguel Santos, or should I say, Agent Miguel Restrepo. The sound of his real name hit like a physical blow. Miguel Restrepo had died 15 years ago, along with 37 innocent people in San Miguel de Allende. Miguel Santos was supposed to be untouchable, unreachable, buried so deep that even DEA databases listed him as deceased. Who is this? Someone who has been very patient. Sophia is unharmed for now. She's asking for you, wondering why strange men are asking about her fisherman boyfriend's past. Miguel pressed himself against the cabin wall as another diver appeared near the bow. This one was smarter, staying in the water while scanning the deck through night vision. Military training, definitely. These weren't cartel sicarios. They moved with the precision of special forces. What do you want? The same thing I have wanted for 15 years. Justice for my son. The words confirmed Miguel's worst fear. Eduardo's biological father, the man whose identity had been classified at the highest levels. Miguel had never known who the boy really belonged to. That information had been need to know, and he hadn't needed to know. The operation was supposed to be simple. Arrest El Chapo's weapons dealer, seize the cash, collect the commendations. Instead, he'd walked 37 people into an execution. Eduardo wasn't supposed to be there, Miguel whispered. My son was visiting his grandmother. A birthday celebration for an old woman who made the mistake of loving a child caught between 2 worlds. The voice carried decades of controlled rage. You fed intelligence to men who cared nothing for collateral damage. You turned my boy into acceptable losses. The second diver began moving toward the ladder. Miguel waited, counting heartbeats, then struck again. This time, he kept the body, dragging it onto the deck and appropriating the tactical gear. Radio earpiece, flashbang grenades, military-grade zip ties. The radio crackled. Delta 1 and 2, report status. Miguel keyed the microphone, pitching his voice low and calm. Boat secure. Target not present. Beginning sweep of marina. A pause. Then, copy that. Charlie team moving to secondary position. Your name, Miguel said into Sofia's phone. I deserve to know whose son I killed. General Arturo Vega, Mexican Army Intelligence. Eduardo was my boy with an American woman who thought she could hide him in El Chapo's family. I allowed the deception because it kept him safe from my enemies. The general's voice hardened. I didn't know it would make him a target for my allies. Miguel's knees nearly buckled. General Vega, the man who'd helped coordinate joint Mexican Army operations for over a decade. Miguel had briefed him personally dozens of times, had sat across conference tables planning raids and strategy. They'd shared meals, war stories, professional respect. Vega had been watching Miguel kill his own son through satellite feeds and tactical reports. The San Miguel operation was your intelligence, Miguel said, understanding flooding through him like poison. You fed us the location. I fed you what my American contacts requested. Thomas Castellanos assured me it was a routine weapons seizure, no civilians at risk. The general's breathing grew heavy. We both learned too late that Thomas had his own agenda. Carlos stirred on the storage bench, his eyes focusing with effort. He'd been listening, understanding more than he'd let on. It was all connected, he whispered. The hit tonight, the ambush. El Lobo didn't want us to kill El Chapo. He wanted us to deliver a message. What message? That the general had found you, that 15 years of hiding were over. Carlos struggled to sit up. The whole thing was theater, man. Expensive, bloody theater to get you and General Vega in the same place at the same time. The cigarette boat's engine roared to life. Miguel moved to the railing and saw it racing toward shore, abandoning the water team. Thomas had planned this perfectly. Force Miguel to reveal himself, bring General Vega out of the shadows, then let them destroy each other while he watched from a safe distance. Sofia, Miguel said into the phone, is alive, for now. You have 1 hour to reach Cantina Rosa. Come alone, come unarmed, and perhaps we can finish what should have ended 15 years ago. The line went dead. Miguel stared at the phone, feeling the last threads of his carefully constructed life snapping one by one. Miguel Santos the fisherman was dying. Miguel Restrepo the monster was clawing his way back to the surface. And somewhere in the dark, Thomas Castellanos was orchestrating a reunion that would drown Puerto Vallarta in blood. Miguel stared at the dead phone, every instinct screaming contradictory commands. Run, fight, disappear into the night like he'd done 15 years ago, save Sofia, protect the Marina family who'd never asked to inherit his sins. He could steal one of the faster boats, be in international waters before dawn. Start over in Belize, maybe Costa Rica. Let Miguel Santos die with his secrets and become someone new, again. The money was still there, buried in accounts Thomas didn't know about. He could vanish, and in a month Sofia would mourn a fisherman who'd probably fallen overboard during a storm. You're thinking about running. Carlos had dragged himself upright, watching Miguel pace the deck like a caged animal. I can see it in your face. Shut up. Won't work, though. El Lobo, he knows you won't leave her. Miguel wanted to argue, but the words felt hollow. 3 years of morning coffee and shared sunsets had created chains stronger than duty or fear. Sofia laughed at his terrible jokes, fell asleep reading in his cabin, trusted him with stories about her childhood that made her cry. She'd made him human again, and humans didn't abandon the people they loved, even when staying meant watching everything burn. The radio crackled. Delta team, do you copy? Charlie reports civilians moving near the restaurant. Miguel keyed the stolen microphone. Copy, maintaining position. But his hands were shaking now. Civilians near Cantina Rosa meant Vega wasn't just targeting Sofia. He was prepared for collateral damage. The general had watched his son die in a firefight. Apparently 15 years hadn't dulled his appetite for blood. Miguel grabbed emergency supplies from the cabin. Medical kit, cash, the spare identity documents he'd hoped never to use. Thomas had taught him to always have an exit strategy, multiple fallback positions. What Thomas hadn't taught him was how to factor love into tactical planning. Carlos, listen carefully. In 10 minutes, Harbor Patrol will find you bleeding on my deck. Tell them nothing except that you need a hospital. No names, no details. And you? Miguel shouldered the tactical gear from the dead diver, checking the rifle's ammunition. Military-grade rounds, armor-piercing. Vega was expecting a war. I'm going to do something incredibly stupid. The marina stretched out before him like a monument to the peaceful life he'd built. Dock lights reflected off calm water, revealing boats that represented dreams and retirement plans and weekend adventures. Normal people living normal lives, blissfully unaware that a ghost from Mexico's dirty war was about to paint their paradise in blood. Miguel thought about Fernando, who'd probably arrive at dawn with fresh bait and stories about his grandson's soccer games. About Maria, humming while she worked, saving for her son's wedding. About Javier, whose fuel dock would become a crime scene by morning. They'd all be questioned, investigated. Their simple lives dissected by federal agents looking for connections to Miguel Santos, who would officially cease to exist before sunrise. The phone buzzed. Thomas again. Vega has 20 men positioned around the cantina. Federal surveillance teams watching from 3 blocks out. Locals being evacuated under the pretense of a gas leak. Your girlfriend is the only civilian inside? Miguel typed back, "Why are you helping me?" Because Vega thinks this is about justice. It's about pride. He wants you to know he found you, wants to watch you break before you die. I just want you alive long enough to learn the truth about San Miguel. Which is that I've spent 15 years setting up this moment. That every move since that night has been leading here. That the real monster in this story isn't who you think it is. Miguel stared at the cryptic message, his blood turning cold. Thomas had always been the strategist, the one who thought 5 moves ahead while Miguel relied on instinct and firepower. But 15 years of planning suggested something far more complex than revenge. The stolen radio crackled with increasing urgency. All units. Target has vacated the marina. Civilian evacuation of Sector 7 is complete. Charlie team report status. Miguel smiled grimly, recognizing the tactical language. Vega was implementing a military operation in civilian territory, which meant he had federal cooperation or was operating completely off the books. Either option suggested resources that made resistance seem suicidal. But Miguel had spent 8 years hunting monsters who considered themselves untouchable. He knew their weakness. They always underestimated the depth of love, the ferocity of a man protecting something pure. Sophia had never asked about his scars, never questioned why he sometimes woke in cold sweats, never pushed when he deflected questions about his past. She'd simply loved Miguel Santos, accepting his brokenness as part of his charm. Now Miguel Restrepo would have to save her. He started the Segunda Oportunidad's engine, feeling the boat's familiar vibration through his bones. Somewhere across the harbor, Sophia was probably terrified, confused, wondering why her quiet fisherman's life had exploded into violence and federal agents. She was about to discover that the man she loved had never actually existed. The Segunda Oportunidad cut through the harbor's dark water like a knife through silk, her engine purring with the quiet confidence Miguel had always loved. But tonight, every familiar sound felt like a eulogy. The boat that had carried him through 3 years of healing was delivering him to his own execution. Miguel forced himself to think tactically, not emotionally. Cantina Rosa sat 2 blocks inland from the tourist marina, a family restaurant where locals gathered for celebrations and Sunday dinners. Sophia's cousin Elena owned it, another thread in the web of innocent lives Miguel had contaminated simply by existing. The tactical radio painted a grim picture. Overwatch confirms 22 military personnel in position. Federal units maintaining perimeter at blocks Charlie through Foxtrot. Local police have been informed of terrorist threat, advised to avoid engagement. Terrorist threat. Vega was using official channels, which meant he had authorization from Mexico City. Miguel wasn't just fighting a grieving father, he was fighting the state itself. The phone buzzed again. Not Thomas this time, but a number he didn't recognize. Miguel? Sophia's voice, small and terrified. I don't understand what's happening. These men, they know things about you, about us. They know about the scar on your shoulder, about how you take your coffee. They've been watching us. Miguel's hands tightened on the wheel. How long had Vega's surveillance been in place? Weeks? Months? Had every intimate moment been catalogued by men with cameras and recording equipment? Are you hurt? No, but Miguel, they're asking about things that don't make sense. About San Miguel de Allende. About a boy named Eduardo. They showed me photographs. Her voice broke. Bodies, Miguel. So many bodies. They said you were there. The weight of 15 years collapsed onto Miguel's chest. He'd always known this moment would come, the inevitable reckoning when his past devoured his present, but he'd imagined it differently. Anonymous death in some foreign jungle, maybe. A bullet from the shadows. Not Sophia's voice cracking as she learned that the man she loved was built on graves. Sophia, listen to me very carefully. Whatever they tell you, whatever they show you, remember that I love you. That part was never a lie. What do you mean, that part? Miguel, what did you do? The question hung in the air like poison gas. What could he say? That he'd once been a man who turned children into acceptable losses? That her gentle fisherman had helped orchestrate massacres? That every tender moment between them had been contaminated by blood he could never wash from his hands? I was a different person before I met you, a person who made choices I can't undo. Silence stretched across the connection. When Sophia spoke again, her voice carried a new quality, not just fear now, but the terrible weight of understanding, the nightmares, the way you flinch when cars backfire, the scars you won't explain. You were a soldier, something like that. And the boy they mentioned, Eduardo? Miguel closed his eyes, seeing again that surveillance photo Thomas had shown him years ago. Eduardo laughing at a birthday party, cake frosting on his nose, surrounded by family who'd all be dead within hours. A child caught between worlds he'd never chosen, paying the price for his father's secrets and Miguel's operational decisions. He was 8 years old. He liked soccer and comic books. He was in the wrong place at the wrong time because I put him there. The confession felt like pulling shrapnel from an old wound. Miguel had never spoken Eduardo's name aloud, had never allowed himself to remember the boy as anything more than an operational failure. But Sophia deserved truth, even if it destroyed her. You killed a child? I killed 37 people. Eduardo was the one I couldn't forget. The boat's engine coughed, and Miguel realized his hands were shaking so violently he could barely maintain course. 15 years of careful numbness were dissolving, leaving him drowning in guilt that felt fresh and raw and immediate. Sophia, I'm coming for you. Whatever happens, whatever you decide about us afterward, I won't let them hurt you. Miguel, don't. Please. Just run. Disappear like you did before. I can see their faces. They don't want me, they want you to suffer. Don't give them what they want. But Miguel was already calculating approach vectors, entry points, fields of fire. The tactical part of his mind, the part that had made him legendary among DEA operatives, was fully awakened now, overriding emotion with cold professional assessment. 22 military personnel meant squad-level organization, probably 2 overwatch positions, mobile reaction teams, dedicated communications. Vega wasn't taking chances with his revenge. The cantina's lights appeared ahead, warm and welcoming as always. Miguel had eaten there dozens of times, celebrating Sophia's birthday, sharing quiet dinners, planning a future that had never really existed. Tonight, it would become a slaughterhouse. And Miguel Restrepo, the hunter, the monster, the man who'd learned to think like the devils he chased, was finally coming home. Miguel cut the engine 50 yards from shore, letting the Segunda Oportunidad drift into the shallows. The cantina blazed with artificial light, too bright, too focused. Tactical illumination designed to eliminate shadows where a target might hide. Vega was thinking like a soldier, not a father, which made him predictable. But as Miguel waded through the surf, rifle slung across his back, something felt wrong. Not the ambush itself, that was exactly what he'd expected. It was the staging, too perfect, too clean. The radio in his ear crackled, target approaching from the water. Delta Team, do you have visual? Negative. Thermal shows one individual, but he's moving wrong. Too confident. Too confident. Because Miguel was confident. 15 years of guilt had been replaced by something sharper, more familiar. The operational clarity that came with accepting death as inevitable. He was walking into a trap, but it was a trap he understood. The cantina's front door stood open, spilling yellow light onto empty cobblestones. Every window glowed, every shadow had been banished. Miguel could see Sofia through the main window, sitting at a corner table with her hands folded, surrounded by men in tactical gear who kept their faces turned away from the glass. Professional, disciplined, completely wrong for a revenge operation. Miguel keyed the stolen radio. All units, this is Delta 7. I have eyes on target. He's not carrying weapons. A pause. Then, Delta 7, identify yourself. We show only 6 Delta team members. Miguel smiled grimly and switched off the radio. Time to make some noise. He kicked in the cantina's side door, the one that led to Elena's kitchen, rifle raised and ready, empty. Pots still warm on the stove, radio playing softly, but no people. The whole building had been cleared except for the front room. Theater. This whole thing was theater. Miguel moved through the kitchen toward the dining room, where Sofia waited with her captors. But something Thomas had texted earlier was echoing in his mind. The real monster in this story isn't who you think it is. Miguel. The voice came from the dining room, cultured, controlled, carrying the weight of military authority. Please, join us. We have much to discuss. Miguel stepped into the light, rifle trained on the nearest soldier, and got his first look at General Arturo Vega in 15 years. The man had aged badly, gray hair, deep lines around his eyes, the hollow look of someone who'd been eating grief for too long. You look older, Vega said. Fishing agrees with you. Let her go. Your fight is with me. Our fight is with you, but it's not what you think. Vega gestured to an empty chair. Please, sit. There are things you need to understand before we proceed. Miguel kept the rifle trained on the general, but allowed his eyes to sweep the room. 6 soldiers, positioned for control rather than execution. Sofia unharmed, watching him with an expression he couldn't read. And on the table between them, a tablet computer displaying photographs. Miguel recognized the first image immediately, the San Miguel compound, taken from aerial surveillance. But this wasn't from the night of the massacre. The timestamp showed 2 weeks earlier, and in the center of the photo, talking to men Miguel had never seen before, was a familiar figure. Thomas Castellanos. Your partner was very busy in the days before San Miguel, Vega said quietly. Meeting with people who had no connection to our operation, transferring money to accounts in the Cayman Islands, making arrangements that neither you nor I knew about. Miguel felt the world shifting beneath his feet. That's impossible. Thomas was running the intelligence. Yes, he was. Vega swiped to the next photograph, Thomas shaking hands with a man Miguel recognized as El Lobo's uncle, a cartel banker who'd been untouchable for decades. He was also selling it. The tablet showed document after document, bank transfers, encrypted communications, meeting logs that painted a picture Miguel's mind refused to accept. Thomas hadn't just fed intelligence to the rival cartels. He'd orchestrated the entire operation, set up both Miguel and Vega, used their shared commitment to justice to mask his own agenda. You see, Miguel, I spent 15 years hunting the wrong man. I blamed you for my son's death, when in truth, you were as much a victim as Eduardo. Thomas played us against each other while he built his fortune on our grief. Sofia spoke for the first time since Miguel had entered. He's been watching us, Miguel, for 3 years. Every phone call, every dinner, every night you held me while you had nightmares. He's been collecting evidence that you're alive. Evidence for whom? Vega's smile held no warmth. For the very cartels that killed my son. It seems Thomas has been earning their gratitude by promising to deliver the DEA operative who cost them millions in seized assets. Tonight's ambush wasn't about revenge, Miguel. It was about delivery. The rifle suddenly felt impossibly heavy in Miguel's hands. 3 years of peace, of believing he'd escaped his past, and Thomas had been orchestrating every moment, had been selling every moment. Where is he? That, Vega said, is what we need to discuss. Because Thomas Castellanos has made one crucial error in his 15-year plan. He assumed that a grieving father and a guilt-ridden operative could never see past their pain to recognize the real enemy. Outside, engines roared to life. Real cartel vehicles this time, not Mexican army. Thomas had kept his promise, delivered both Miguel and General Vega to men who'd been waiting 15 years for revenge. And suddenly Miguel understood that everything, the staged ambush, the emotional confrontation, even this moment of revelation, had been designed to keep them distracted until the real killers arrived. The sound of approaching engines cut through the night like a death knell. Miguel's tactical training kicked in immediately, counting vehicles, estimating personnel, calculating how long they had before the cantina became a killing field. "How many?" he asked, moving toward the window. Vega was already directing his men with hand signals. 6 vehicles, 40, maybe 50 sicarios. Thomas promised them both our heads on a platter. Sophia stood frozen beside the table, her face pale with dawning comprehension. This wasn't just about Miguel's past anymore. She was collateral damage in a 15-year game of betrayal and greed. "The back exit?" Miguel asked. "Blocked 10 minutes ago," one of Vega's soldiers reported. "We're surrounded." Miguel felt a familiar coldness settle over him, the operational mindset that had kept him alive through 8 years of hunting monsters. But this time was different. This time he wasn't just fighting for survival. He was fighting for the woman who'd given him a reason to believe in redemption. "General," Miguel said, shouldering his rifle, "I need you to understand something. For 15 years I've carried the weight of your son's death. Every night I've seen his face. Every morning I've wondered if I deserved the peace I'd found." Vega nodded grimly. "And now?" "Now I know that peace was built on another lie. Thomas didn't just betray our operation. He betrayed Eduardo's memory. He let us destroy ourselves with guilt while he profited from our son's blood." The word slipped out before Miguel could stop it. Our son, but somehow it felt right. Eduardo's death had created a bond between them, twisted though it was. 2 men who'd loved a child in different ways, manipulated into hating each other by the real monster. Sophia moved closer to Miguel, her hand finding his arm. "Whatever happened before, whoever you were, that man saved my life tonight. The man I love came for me." Miguel looked into her eyes and saw something he'd thought lost forever, not judgment but understanding. She'd heard his confession, seen the photographs, learned about the graves he'd filled, and she was still here. "Sophia, you need to know—" "I need to know that you're going to fight for us," she interrupted. "For the life we built, for the future we planned. I won't let Thomas Castellanos destroy that too." The first bullets shattered the cantina's front windows. Vega's soldiers returned fire immediately, their disciplined volleys contrasting with the wild spray from the cartel gunmen. But numbers would tell eventually. 40 sicarios against 6 soldiers and 1 former operative. Miguel's phone buzzed. Thomas, of course. Beautiful, isn't it? 15 years of careful planning coming together. You and Vega, finally united against a common enemy. Too bad you won't live long enough to appreciate the poetry. Miguel typed back with one hand while firing with the other. "You made one mistake, Thomas." "Only one?" "You assumed I was still the broken man who ran from San Miguel. You forgot what made me dangerous in the first place." "And what's that?" Miguel looked at Sophia, crouched behind overturned tables but refusing to leave his side. At Vega, bleeding from a graze on his forehead but coordinating his men's defense with calm professionalism. At the photographs on the tablet, evidence of Thomas's betrayal that could bring down half the cartels in Mexico. "I never learned how to quit." He pocketed the phone and turned to Vega. "General, I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly. Now, especially now. When you found out I was alive, when you started planning this operation, what did you want, really want?" Vega fired 3 precise shots through the broken window before answering. "Justice for Eduardo. For all the children caught in our dirty war. Then help me end it. Not just tonight, but all of it. Thomas has been playing cartels against law enforcement for 15 years. He has files, connections, financial records, everything we need to burn it all down. And you think we can get to him?" Miguel smiled, feeling 15 years of guilt transform into something sharper and more useful. Purpose. "I think Thomas made the same mistake every monster makes. He confused fear with respect. He thinks because we ran once, we'll run again. Another volley of gunfire erupted from outside. Closer this time. The sicarios were advancing. Sofia grabbed Miguel's hand. "Whatever you're planning, I can see it in your eyes. Promise me something. Anything. Promise me you're not doing this just for revenge. Promise me you're doing it so we can go home." Miguel squeezed her fingers, feeling the weight of every choice that had led to this moment. The boy he'd failed, the man who'd betrayed them all, the woman who'd given him a second chance at being human. "I promise," he said. "But first, we're going to remind Thomas Castellanos why they called us ghosts." The plan came together in Miguel's mind with the clarity that had once made him legendary, audacious, desperate, and requiring the kind of trust that 15 years of hatred had made impossible until tonight. "Vega," Miguel said, ejecting his rifle's magazine to check ammunition. "Your men, do they still believe you're here for revenge?" "They follow orders." The general's eyes narrowed. "What are you thinking?" Miguel pulled out his phone, scrolling to Thomas's contact. "Thomas has been orchestrating this for 15 years. He knows how we think, how we move, what we'll do under pressure. But there's one thing he doesn't know, which is that we've figured it out." Miguel held up the phone. "He's watching this through Cartel radios, probably has drones overhead. As far as he knows, we're still trapped, still hating each other, still playing the roles he wrote for us 15 years ago." Sofia understood first. "You want to fake your death. Not fake it. Sell it." Miguel looked at Vega. "Your men are disciplined enough to stage a betrayal. Make it look like you finally got your revenge, then surrender to the cartels. Thomas will want confirmation, photos, video, proof that his plan worked." Vega was quiet for a long moment, working through the implications. Outside, the gunfire had slowed to sporadic bursts. The sicarios were consolidating, preparing for a final assault. "And while they're celebrating their victory, we go after Thomas, together." Miguel felt the weight of Eduardo's memory between them, no longer a source of division but shared purpose. The boy deserves better than having his death turned into profit. "Miguel," Sofia said quietly, "if this goes wrong, then I'll have died trying to earn the peace you gave me." He touched her face, memorizing the curve of her cheek. "But it won't go wrong. Thomas's fatal flaw is the same as every narcissist. He can't imagine a world where he's not the smartest person in the room." Vega was already signaling his men, explaining the deception in rapid hand gestures. Professional soldiers, they adapted without question. Within minutes they'd arranged the theater, overturned furniture, staged blood patterns, even a mock argument between Miguel and the general that would carry to the listening devices. "You cost me my son," Vega shouted, grabbing Miguel's collar with genuine emotion bleeding through the performance. 15 years I've waited for this moment." Miguel let himself be thrown against the wall, felt the impact jar his ribs. But his response came from a deeper truth than their staged script. Eduardo deserved better than both of us, better than the war that killed him. He deserved a father who could protect him. He deserved a world where 8-year-old boys don't pay for their father's choices. The words hung in the air, carrying 15 years of genuine anguish. For a moment, the performance became real. Two broken men facing the shared weight of a child's death, the guilt that had shaped every decision since. Then Vega's pistol was in his hand, pointed at Miguel's chest. "Goodbye, Miguel Santos." The blank cartridge fired with convincing authority. Miguel jerked backward, clutching his chest, letting the blood capsule Sofia had prepared from the cantina's kitchen spread across his shirt. He collapsed behind the overturned bar, forcing his breathing to shallow gasps. Outside, the gunfire stopped entirely. "General Vega," the voice carried a heavy Sinaloan accent. "We know you're in there. Send out the American's body, and we'll discuss terms." Vega's soldiers moved with practiced efficiency, wrapping Miguel in a blood-stained tablecloth, carrying him to the cantina's entrance. Sofia played her part perfectly, hysterical grief, accusations against the general, the performance of a woman watching her world collapse. But as they loaded Miguel's supposedly lifeless form onto a stretcher, she whispered words meant only for him, "Come back to me." The cartel lieutenant who examined Miguel's body was thorough but unimaginative. Pulse check at the throat where Miguel had compressed the artery. Visual confirmation of blood and apparent wound. A few photographs for Thomas's verification. "Good," the lieutenant said, speaking into his radio. "El Americano is dead. The general and his men are surrendering as agreed." Miguel heard Thomas's voice crackle through the speaker. "Excellent. Bring them all to the warehouse. I want to debrief General Vega personally." "Perfect." Thomas's ego demanded a final confrontation, a moment to gloat over enemies who'd never understood his true game. He would want to savor his victory, explain his brilliance to captive audience. It was exactly the mistake Miguel had been counting on. As the cartel vehicles pulled away from the cantina, Miguel lay still in the back of a truck, listening to Sofia sob convincingly in the vehicle behind him. But beneath the staged grief, he could hear something else, the steel that had kept her running her business in cartel territory, the strength that had seen through his nightmares to the man he was trying to become. In 6 hours, Thomas would learn the difference between hunting broken people and facing the united dead. Dawn came slowly over Puerto Vallarta, painting the harbor in shades of gold and amber that reminded Miguel of better mornings. He sat on the end of his dock, legs dangling over water that reflected a sky finally clear of smoke and sirens. The Esperanza bobbed gently at her mooring, hull scarred by bullet holes but afloat, like everything else that had survived the night. The warehouse operation had gone exactly as planned. Thomas's ego had indeed demanded a performance, gathering his prisoners to explain 15 years of manipulation and profit. He'd monologued about chess pieces and long games, while Miguel lay silent in his staged death shroud, counting heartbeats until the moment came to rise. The look on Thomas's face when the dead man opened his eyes would stay with Miguel forever, not satisfaction, but something sadder. The recognition that his former partner had become exactly the kind of monster they'd once hunted together. Sofia emerged from the cabin carrying 2 cups of coffee, her movements careful around the bruises that mapped the night's violence across her arms. She'd insisted on coming to the warehouse, refusing to be protected while others finished what had begun with her kidnapping. Miguel had learned not to argue with that particular expression. "The Federales finished with their questions?" she asked, settling beside him. "For now. General Vega's testimony, Thomas's files, the financial records, they have enough to dismantle 3 cartels and half the corrupt officials in Jalisco." Miguel accepted the coffee, inhaling the familiar comfort of her morning ritual. "The DEA wants me to testify in Houston next month. And?" Miguel was quiet for a long moment, watching fishing boats head out for the day's work. Honest labor, simple purpose, the kind of life he'd built here. "I'll go. Eduardo deserves that much. All those children do." Sofia nodded, understanding without needing details. The boy's death had been the wound that nearly destroyed 2 good men. His memory would be the foundation for whatever justice came next. "Vega stopped by earlier," she said. "While you were sleeping." Miguel turned to study her profile, reading the conversation in the careful way she held her shoulders. He wants to know what happens now. He wants to know if you can forgive him. 15 years of hunting the wrong man, threatening the woman you love, he's carrying that weight. And what did you tell him? Sofia smiled, the expression transforming the geography of her bruises into something beautiful. "I told him that forgiveness isn't yours to give alone, that it belongs to everyone who got caught in the crossfire. But I also told him that Eduardo would be proud of how it ended, his father and the man he thought killed, his son, standing together against the real monster." Miguel felt something settle in his chest, a knot that had been there so long he'd forgotten what breathing without it felt like. Not absolution, that would take time, earned through testimony and truth-telling and whatever small goods he could do with the years remaining, but peace with the weight. Acceptance that some guilt was meant to be carried, not discarded. "The fishing business," he said eventually. "I know this changes things. The publicity, the trial, people knowing who I really am." "Miguel." Sofia's voice carried the same steel that had sustained her through cartel territory, through kidnapping, through learning that the man she loved had been living under an assumed name. "Do you remember what you told me the first time we talked about your nightmares?" He did, 3 years ago, after she'd held him through a particularly bad one, when he'd tried to explain without revealing the specifics, that some people don't deserve peace. And what did I say? Miguel smiled, remembering. That peace isn't something you deserve. It's something you choose to accept when it's offered. The offer stands, Sophia said simply. Charter business, morning coffee, growing old together on this dock. Your past is part of who you are, not something that disqualifies you from happiness. They sat in comfortable silence as the harbor came alive around them. Fishermen preparing nets, vendors setting up stalls, tourists beginning their search for adventure in paradise. The ordinary magic of a place where life continued regardless of the darkness that occasionally surfaced. Miguel's phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number that made him tense until he read it. Eduardo's mother wants to meet you. When you're ready, Arturo. Not today, perhaps not for months, but someday he would sit across from a woman whose son he'd failed to protect, and they would try to build something meaningful from shared loss. The thought should have terrified him. Instead, it felt like the next step on a path he was finally ready to walk. You know what I realized last night? Sophia asked, leaning against his shoulder. What's that? You never told me your real name. Miguel laughed. Actually laughed, for the first time in longer than he could remember. Miguel Santosis, my real name. Miguel Rodriguez was the identity I borrowed to hide. Good, Sophia said, kissing his temple. I like Miguel Santos better anyway. He's the one who came for me. The morning sun climbed higher, burning off the last traces of night, promising another day in paradise for those wise enough to recognize it when offered.